Good afternoon. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
It's nice to see you again. Welcome to our afternoon edition of thematic webinars. This afternoon is thematic specific objective 3.2, accessible and inclusive services in education, training, and lifelong learning. My colleague, Stephen Halligan, our coordinator and expert on this topic, will give you a presentation. Thank you, Steve.
Thank you, Mirjana. And good afternoon to all. Welcome to this webinar for 3.2, the accessible and inclusive quality services in education, training, and lifelong learning. We had a webinar this morning on specific objective 3.1, so some of you may well have attended that. There'll be some inevitably repeat information on calls, etc., but I hope we can get to the main meat of priority 3. Specific objective 3.2 for you. So I will share the screen. Okay, so in the webinar this afternoon, we'll start by looking at the background to priority 3 itself, a more social Danube region. We'll also reflect after that on the first call for proposals, because we have had one call already, and it'd be useful, I think, for you to understand a bit more about that. Then we'll look at the progress towards the second call itself, which is what we're looking at now. And then we'll move to the more concrete aspects of specific objective 3.2 in terms of the Danube region challenges and needs, the focus areas of 3.2 itself, indicative activities, project ideas and the intervention logic, stakeholders and target groups, and synergy and capitalization. We'll follow this by the general understanding of the program support for applicants and some closing thoughts for you. So a background to this is that if we look back to 2017, the Commission presented a European Pillar of Social Rights with 20 key principles. And the aim was to balance the economic more with the social, so have a particular focus towards the social, which was appealing. It had been neglected to some point. So we have the European Pillar of Social Rights. The Commission wanted to move this into the programmes, and so produced a policy objective 4 on a more social Europe. Programmes had the opportunity to have a social focus, and those that chose, for example, the Interreg programmes and ourselves, chose a priority 3, a more social Danube region. So this is what we set up for the programme. And within this, we have 3 specific objectives. We have the accessible, inclusive and effective labour markets, which we looked at this morning. We have the specific objective that we're looking at now, which is accessible and inclusive quality services in education, training and lifelong learning. And finally, 3.3, which is a socio-economic development through heritage, culture and tourism. Now, there is a webinar which has already taken place on 3.3, and that's available on our website. So that's a bit about the background, and that's how we've developed. But at the moment, we're at the stage of the first call, closing this off in terms of moving to projects. It's not quite finalized. We expect significant movement next week. And then we will really understand which projects we have to start progressing with. I'd like to give you a sense of that first call, really to try to generate an understanding of it, in terms of numbers, but also a bit of background in terms of why certain project ideas were successful or unsuccessful. So if we see 3.2 from the first call, we see the number of applications at 22. It's a higher number than 3.1, but we still feel that this could be increased significantly. So we'd like to see more proposals. That's the first point I'd make. In terms of the distribution of the partners involved, we can see in this small table here the 14 countries, and there's a variety of involvement there. We can see high involvement from Romania, Republic of Serbia, Croatia, and Bulgaria. Conversely, we see relatively low involvement from Germany and Slovakia. We'd like to encourage, obviously, those countries to participate more, but we'd also generally like a greater level of participation. Now, I mentioned this number of 22, the number of applications that came in, and we can see here that only 2 of those progressed from the first step to the second step. Now, that's a relatively small proportion, indeed, within the program compared to other specific objectives, and it's something we'd definitely like to improve. This morning, we were asked the question in terms of what caused this difference. And to be fair, we probably could have responded in a bit more detail on that. And the response we gave was that obviously it's connected to the assessment and maybe eligibility issues. But for this webinar, I've sort of downloaded a report that we did to help give a sense of some of the issues here in this specific objective as to why there was such a low progression rate. So I'll read directly from the report some of the observations that were made. A significant number of EOIs, that's expression of interest, were submitted with low levels of territorial coverage and partners. So 7 were submitted with 5 partners or less. So although we have a minimum level of partnership at 3, we tend to have an average coming in at 12 partners for ideas. It's very much dependent on the ideas. It's dependent on the regions which are involved. But typically, we'd expect for ideas to have a greater sort of level of involvement territorially, so more partners, particularly when we look, and we'll look at this later, in terms of the types of approaches that we're looking at under 3.2 and the stakeholders involved. The second comment is that proposals were submitted which had no or very limited connection to the programme focus areas. We will look at these focus areas very shortly, but that's quite fundamental. Applications must meet the focus areas strongly. Third comment is that there were proposals which offered a part relevance with the focus area of the specific objective 3.2, but at times missed the social consideration underpinning specific objective 3.2. So perhaps here we could think about an idea which offered sort of training within an occupation, perhaps a professional occupation, without linking it to social need or territorial need. On the other hand, we had ideas which had were missing the human capital development understanding. So they're going wholly social without a human capital development understanding. And by that, I mean the training involved or the development processes involved were not moving towards the labour market, which is an important consideration. Generally, the understanding of territorial logic and approach was an aspect that was not well considered. So it's not enough to sit on individual development, training, etc., but to really link with the territory that is involved, developing that. Some of the partnerships did not adequately demonstrate their reach to and expertise with final beneficiaries. So tackling a particular topic without any real evidence within the application that the proposed developers were close to the beneficiaries or had links that they could develop towards the beneficiaries. Well, we had high budget proposals offered with limited understanding of the cost to the delivery aspect, and linked to that in some ways are a number of projects with high infrastructure and works development costs. So, for example, expanding training centres, etc., which is not what we do. Finally, which is important, the demonstration of added value. So we know that there's a lot of education and training work which is being carried out, of course, within individual countries, within regions, and so we need it to have a real feel of a sense of added value. So that's a sense of why we have such a low proportion going from the first phase to the second phase. And I hope that as we develop through the presentation, that there's a greater appreciation of what we're looking for is developed. So the second call itself, well, it's been delayed as we need to finalize the first call. So we're now looking towards the end of October, end of this month to open, with a closing date of the end of March 24. Looking to start the projects early 2025. As a difference to the first call, this is a one-step application procedure. So this obviously means that there is not that stage between a first step and a second step to improve applications. So very important to have a good focus within the first application, the only application. The application is via electronic submission through GEMS, which is our electronic system. The partnership is around the lead applicant, lead partner principle, first amongst equals. We have a minimum of 3 finance partners from 3 countries. 1 must be from the EU. Associated strategic partners can be added. They have their limitations in terms of how you can cost them to travel and accommodation. The lead partner can be from any of the 14 countries, apart from the Ukraine. That's a temporary situation because of the current unfortunate circumstances. The inclusion of non-EU partners is encouraged. There are no budget restrictions, but typical projects are somewhere between 1.5 million and 2.5 million. The duration of projects must not exceed 36 months. And the EU contribution to projects is at a co-financing rate of 80% with no pre-financing. Those of you who are looking to move towards this as a lead applicant, there will be lead applicant seminars going into a lot of this in more detail. They'll be held in November the 7th and the 20th. So it'd be worth making a note of that. Okay, so if we look at the background in terms of the needs and challenges of the Danube region, we can start at an understanding of the educational attainment levels. I'd like to highlight from the map here the situation, which is still, although this dates from 2013 to 2018, is still pertinent today, it's still relevant. So we have here, if we look at the red and orange colours to the right, we have obviously a clear colour difference, and this represents the lower secondary education or less. So we have numbers going up to 25% in these regions, which have this level of lower secondary education or less. Towards the west, we obviously see the yellows and the greens, which is indicating a higher level of education attainment levels. Now, clearly, there's a strong point within this in terms of educational attainment levels being strongly correlated with employment potential. And this is why we highlight it here. When we look at the reasons behind this, we're looking at situations of early school leaving, often due to fragile socioeconomic situations, could be from learning difficulties, could be a culture within families or within locations of early school leaving. health issues, disability, proximity to providers. So there can be a lot of reasons behind this, and it can affect some communities more than others. So, for example, ethnic minorities, particularly, we could mention Roma in certain parts of the Danube region. When we look at this as a program, we're considering youth, because quite a bit of focus of this early educational difficulties will be youth from 15 to 29. As a program, we're not looking towards the earlier age range, but more the intersection with the labour market and preparation towards that. That's not to say that we couldn't go lower in terms of age group approaches, but the majority of the focus should be towards that intersection with the labour market and beyond. It's interesting when we think back to the Commission's approach that we started with, and there's a target of 60% of the population moving towards that level who are in education and training. So we also have within the region needs and challenges, not just about the way society develops, but the society's relationship with industry and this human capital development. And we know this, I think everybody sees this highlighted within news articles in the press quite frequently in terms of the need of industry and business for workers and the skills shortages that exist. In the table here, just to highlight the point, we see the proportion chart showing the proportion of establishments with 10 or more employees having difficulty in recruiting employees with the required skills. And this is taken from 2019. It's just one example, but it shows there that we look at the red, which is the very employers having very strong difficulty in attracting employees with the right skills, and the blue with fairly difficult. So we can see that there's a huge problem here. It varies between sectors, it varies between regions, but we can see a clear issue here, particularly running up to figures sort of 90% either struggling to find skilled employees, very difficult level or fairly difficult. So there is this skills shortage in the region, and this manifests itself in different ways. For example, the gap between the skills of an employee has and the skills needed for the job. The skills mismatch between skills and jobs. So that maybe that in particular regions that just are not there is not the human resource to match the skills. This mismatch can extend to the education and training system. In other words, that there is the education and training systems are not set up to develop the human capacity in line with the local or beyond needs of industry and business. We have a problem here in terms of the brain drain, which contributes to this, in that we have regions where there's significant proportions of particularly skilled youth who are leaving, migrating to other parts of the Danube region and beyond. We have a demographic problem. We have skilled workers falling out or going probably quite happily out of the workforce, some of them, but nevertheless, it's creating problems for the skills needs within industry and business. Part of the Commission's approach, and widely actually within individual countries and regions, is a push towards lifelong learning. Here on this chart, we can see the understanding of how this is developing in the EU countries. And we see here this particular chart reflects on the percentage of population aged 25 to 64 who participated in learning in the last 4 weeks. Now, this is a snapshot from 2021, and we see within the region, it's very difficult to see the countries here, but we see on the left that the country which has in the Danube region, which has the highest participation rates, is Slovenia. And then we see Austria, but other countries within the region are below the EU average. So we see a challenge here to create this adaptable society who can change to the current needs as the developments happen, the digitalization, movement to the green economy, and this different types of working. It's quite interesting when we consider the approaches here, particularly Slovenia, in terms of being one of the top performers according to this Eurostat chart. How that has come about, there's probably people on here who could offer a strong understanding of this, but it seems to be that Slovenia has had a direction towards lifelong learning, probably talked about in different terminology, since way back to the 1970s and towards the 1980s with directed education acts towards this, and sort of perpetuating this notion of education as an integral part of one's life and work. So probably, as well as a focus now, Slovenia has obviously achieved this over time, but nevertheless, the point to make is that there are strong lifelong sort of experiences within the Danube region, which can be built upon as we look towards develop project ideas. The focus areas of 3.2, so we now move directly to the specific objective 3.2 and how it is focused. First focus is developing innovative education models, programs, practical tools, and materials for disadvantaged learners, including early school leavers that we spoke about. Focus 2, about maximizing the use of existing knowledge and experience to develop best practices in inclusive education policy and advancing education and policy reform. And focus area 3, innovative approaches to encourage and improve inclusive vocational education and training and lifelong learning. So it's very important to consider these 3 focus areas. At the start of the presentation, I mentioned the difficulty that some ideas had in moving from the first step to the second step, and part of that was about not addressing one of these or multiple focus areas that we have here. So again, very important to really look at this closely. Indicative activities. Now, when the program was being developed, the responsible bodies from the different countries all came together, and eventually we arrived at these indicative activities. Now, these aren't exclusive in the sense that you can develop other ideas which fit into the focus areas, but these were thought to be important for the Danube region. So activity 1 is around innovative educational models, programs, practical tools and materials. This is a developmental aspect. It's expected to develop on from model regions within the Danube, but with mutual learning developed from pilot regions. So it's an important point to mention here that when we think about developing from model regions, that we also understand that the model regions themselves should also get something out of the project idea. But there should be some also mutual learning developed back to the model regions. Activity 2 is around developing best practices in educational policy, gathering and disseminating knowledge, advancing education and policy reforms at the national and regional level across the Danube region. Third activity is the establishment or development of existing scientific and educational networks to combat brain drain. We spoke about this earlier, and how particularly smaller peripheral regions are suffering from brain drain, which is having a significant impact on the well-being of the regions. Activity 4 is around innovative digital and remote education with e-solutions to mitigate rural disadvantage, provide employment-related training and combat brain drain. Again. Activity 5 is around knowledge exchange and the sharing of experience in elaborating and developing accessible and inclusive vocational education and training models and systems. It should lead to concrete outputs, the development of work-based training schemes, which better support relevant skills development to match the needs of the labour market. So these are the indicative activities falling from the focus areas. But I'd like to now just look at the project ideas in terms of relating them to the intervention logic. Now here we have the intervention logic, the form of it, and in a way it develops from significant parts of it from what I've just been saying. So we look at the needs and challenges. It's very important to offer with your idea an understanding of the background within the territorial approach that you choose. So this may well be looked at from a Danube region perspective, but also ultimately you will be working with a select group of partners from a select group of territories, and also you'll include activities, for example, pilot activities. So it's important to offer the understanding not just at the Danube region level, but to those territorial areas that you are choosing to work with. We have found this is missing from a large number of applications. When you move down the logic, you look to address these challenges through objectives. You can have a maximum of 3 project-specific objectives here, but the objectives that you choose should meet the program-specific objectives. So in other words, they should fit closely with the specific objective 3.2, the focus areas. Now, what we suggest is that when you have developed your idea, that you discuss with the national contact points, but also the Secretariat in terms of the idea itself, but also its fit with the project and with the program specific objectives. Obviously, if it's not fitting, then it's like some of the ideas we mentioned earlier, which don't progress through the assessment system. We move down again the logic. We looked at project outputs. It's important here that the outputs match the program output indicators. So it's partly about definition here. So we have had the problem, for example, with strategy outputs, that they have developed in the form of recommendations. Now, we wouldn't consider the recommendations as meeting the program output indicator of a strategy, which is looking at mid to long-term planning, and particularly with take-up from those relevant stakeholders. And the take-up is important for the results. So if we go down again to the results, we're looking at those outputs being taken up, being used, having a further life and impact beyond the project. So terminology and definitions are important here. As I mentioned, there's the possibility to check this with your national contact point and the Secretariat in the form of consultation. So I would strongly encourage you to make sure this is in the correct form and to seek out consultations. So we've mentioned the importance of the social direction and the variety of disadvantaged groups that are potentially involved, and we also move to business to industry as well. And then we have the strategic elements. So we have a range of stakeholders which we anticipate to be involved in these types of project ideas. So again, I reflect back on some of the comments I made between those proposals which didn't progress in the first call, and how some of them were very limited in terms of the partnerships they put together, not only in terms of numbers, but in terms of the scope of the stakeholders and target groups that they had involved. So here in this table, we see the range of stakeholders and target groups, obviously significant. We know that when we talk about education and training, that it's very much a national level and regional level approach. That's well understood. But we also feel it's important to emphasize that there is the potential for the transnational working to complement this. We would like to see this national, regional, local, we'll see this on the list, developed to a much greater extent. In other words, the ideas are very well seated within their own sort of context, but also relevant, common problem approaches at the transnational level. We know that there are many programs which are involved with education and training, and also strategic approaches. We particularly highlight here the Danube Region Strategy, actually got the PA9, which is the people and skills. It'll be important as you develop your ideas, as you develop applications, to have a connection with the USDR where it makes sense, where there's potential for the USDR and for your idea. And you should develop the response within your application towards this, also with the background understandings, but also within the work plan, so that you demonstrate concrete actions towards this. Of course, we have Interreg programs to create synergy and capitalize from. ESF Plus, it's a very important sort of approach for education and training, particularly towards the disadvantaged. So a key area also to take consideration of. Erasmus Plus, Horizon Europe, we mentioned national, regional, local, and of course there are other initiatives. So just a few thoughts on how we're supporting applicants. We have the website, it's highlighted here. We'll make available program documents, I think, towards the end of this month. The applicant manual, for example, and the guidelines for filling in the application form. We'll have, as we have here, specific objective webinars, and also the lead applicant webinars that we mentioned earlier on the 7th of November and the 20th. Consultations are available with project offices. Please feel free to contact me on this specific objective 3.2. We have a new, hot off the press, I would say, matchmaking facility which is coming to being, and Miri may say a few words about that.
Thank you, Steve. So we're in the process of signing the contract with the service providers. So very soon we will have the matchmaking platform. And thank you for mentioning it. Any updates will be on our website. You will be duly informed. And on that matchmaking platform, you can search for partners in case that you have a project idea. You can also publish it and then search for adequate partners. So it will be of a great help to you and to your colleagues.
Thank you, Mary.
Thank you.
In addition, we have the national contact points who are available and are also organising national level events. You've probably, if you've been looking at the website, seen these advertised already. As mentioned, there's the EU-SDR priority areas, again, who are available to discuss ideas. and to link with and create directions. So there's quite a lot of support available there. And of course, we urge you to take advantage of these possibilities. Some closing thoughts. It's a transnational program, and although we have a minimum of 3 countries with at least one EU partner, it's more than that. It's working on these shared common problems and providing shared solutions, moving towards concrete processes and structures. And this is within the frame of the project, but also beyond. So we see a deep meaning with this transnationality, and you should reflect that within the application form. The added value, I've kind of spoken quite a lot about this in terms of the understanding of what's around within the education and training field. It will be important to demonstrate within the application form how you add value to that. It also gives the assessor the sense that this is well thought out, that the idea is rooted, that it understands its context, and it moves and develops from that. Finally, on this part, the transferability and durability. What happens next? In the application form, you will, and the intervention logic is developed towards this in terms of demonstrating transferability and durability. This is more so two words on what to avoid. I also mentioned We are sorry about this, but we've had very serious connection problems here at the ministry in terms of how we can connect. I'm not sure if you can hear me, if somebody can verify that you can hear. Okay, we're very sorry about the connection problems. We were literally at the end of the presentation, one slide from the end. We were making some points to avoid, but you can see those from the slides. So it is the end of the presentation. But the only point that we'd like to do now is to address any questions that you may have. I'll take to Miri now.
Thank you, Steve. What is important is that there was no problem with, let's say, the most of your presentations. The connections were good. So Steve really provided you with the most important things, very useful tips. This recording will be uploaded on our website as well as the PPT, so you can go through it once again. And now we would like to see what questions we received. Well, it seems that there is no question. So, Steve, it seems that everything was so clear.
Well, until the end.
Till the end, but the most important things were at the beginning. So.
Yes. So if you have any questions and or particularly you want consultations, then please do contact me. We of course wish you well. We need
a question.
We need your experience and your ideas to come through. So thank you. I think we may have a question.
We may have a question.
Just a second, wait for 1 or 2 minutes because I joined later and you don't see the previous questions.
So there is one question saying, can a project focusing on the integration of children with special educational needs be supported?
Potentially, yes. I mentioned during the presentation that we're looking in terms of the age range at youth from 15 upwards. And this means that we're really looking towards that intersection with the youth between the education, the formal education and the movement to the labour market. So yes, it can, but not at the very young age range, but the higher age range.
Thank you very much. Labor, let's see. So thank you also, Christina, for asking. Labor market. Okay, can project include a research component in addition to re-election?
Yes, it's an interesting question. We should look at it from the perspective that we are not a research program as such, and therefore we wouldn't have the bulk of the work focused towards research elements. However, we do pilot, we have pilot approaches, and therefore we would expect some level of research and study before pilots. And so there can be research elements, but not towards the majority of the project.
Thank you very much. There was one question. One of the participants was asking if we can retake the slide, the last slide on what to avoid. But yes, it will be uploaded on our website, so there is not a problem. Please visit it. Most probably it will be uploaded tomorrow for this specific objective 3.2. However, by the end of the day, I hope that we will have presentation for 3.1, so you can find the same slide there. Another question, are service offering to young people financed or just the creation of methodology?
Yes, we would look at this in terms of sort of piloting approaches. So there could be a pilot towards service approaches for disadvantaged beneficiaries, etc. But yes, a major part of that would be the methodological side of it.
Thank you, Steve. Is it possible to have more than one personal consultation with you regarding one project proposal?
Yeah, normally we limit it to one formal consultation, but if you have smaller points of consideration, then please address me with those. So it's not that we cut off our communication completely apart from the consultation. So one formal, probably when you have a more significant development towards the idea and how you will approach it. I would suggest to arrange the consultation at that point, but if you have any points where you want clarification, then please feel free to contact us.
Thank you, Steve. It seems that we don't have any more questions. No, there's one more. You presented, no, if the partners from other countries or other organizations from the same brand umbrella, which are independent, considered eligible, or do they need to be totally different organizations?
We'd have to look at that carefully, and I would suggest to go to the national contact point to really have a look at the structure of the individual organizations that you're proposing. So I would check that with the national contact points.
Oh, thank you. It seems that we don't have any more questions.
Thank you, Mary.
Thank you very much, Steve.
And thank you to everybody out there. Again, apologies for this for the disconnect. We'll do our best to try to find a solution to that in the future. So thank you, and I wish you well, and I hope to see you and be in contact with you shortly. Thank you.
Thank you all. Bye-bye. Thank you.